Now we're not necessarily on the air yet at IBGR. We've got about a minute here, maybe a minute 15. So for everybody there, I won't go through what I'm going to cover when we go on the air, but I appreciate you watching, whether you're watching live or you're watching this as a recording on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Also, we are going live on Rumble now. So we're trying to cover all the platforms where we think business owners are at. All righty. So let's see here. Let's check the sound again. And yeah, well, it takes. Who's that guy? Who's that guy? I got to tell you one thing. Running a radio station, like, you know what? I've and that's really what the truth is. So, um, all right. Okay. So the only thing I'm looking at this, and we still haven't been advertised yet. So, and the reason we haven't been advertising is that we're trying to get all the pieces together. So this is the soft launch. It looks like we're going to have to do some calibration. We've got a high quality camera. Now we've got professional lights, which you can't see. Well, looks like we had. All right, so uh let's do this together. Let's start now. Thank you for joining us today on the IBG report. On the internet is so IBGR stands for International Business Growth Radio. We are heard in 183 countries around the world. And our focus, our sole focus here is helping business owners start with a new one here, renew and then exit. Because sometimes what happens is you grow your business and you get, well, I'm not ready to quit yet. So what do I do? So how do I renew it or reinvent the business? And for those people looking to say, okay, I've had enough. I either want to start something else or I'm really done. And how do you get out? So my name is William Eastman. I am co-founder and managing partner here at IBGR. And let me tell you, we're so it's rocking and rolling here. So you need to go to the website ibgr.network. That's ibgr.network. It's our call sign, our URL, and our broadcast. We've got shows that doing. And so when you do that, then scroll down. When you get to that page, scroll down and go to Season of Operations. All the seasons, you can see everybody we got on the air and click that. Now, those of you who are watching or joining me from Facebook and LinkedIn, then that's pretty simple with the okay, because I've got it there on the screen. Okay, so let's rock and roll. And so as you get there, this is track 2. Now, what are we doing? This series is something that we built after 4 decades in business and 5 recessions. We thought that perhaps we had a pretty good answer to the business owner who says, what do I do during an economic contraction or recession? And so the first thing is to survive. Okay, how do I get through it? But I don't think that's good enough. I think that once you've said, okay, here's how you survive. What about how do I come out of this stronger than I was when I went in? And to me, that is really far more critical. So we're kind of doing 2 stages now. Today, I'm still talking about how to get through it. Now we have 3 tracks. On Monday, we talk about finance, and that track is called Owning Your Numbers. And if you think about it, these 3 are very interrelated. Knowing your numbers means you know the numbers, you know the critical things, and we've talked about different types of reports that you can traditionally get, and now we're going into greater detail in that track. That's on Mondays. On Tuesdays, today, what we're talking about is operations. And the focus of operations is becoming the lowest cost producer. And as I said many times on this show, we are not talking about pricing here. That's a separate decision. We're saying you need, in this type of environment, if you're going to manage your numbers tightly, especially manage your cash flow, then you have to get your cost under control. If you become the lowest cost producer, that means you make it better, faster, for less than any of your competitors. And that's where you need to go, because if revenue goes down, how do I hold margin, or how do I increase margin? It's quite possible, if let's say you had a 10 or 15% decrease in revenue, but you were able to reduce your cost by that amount, you wind up with the same margin. And all of you know, all you business owners out there know that it's not what you take in, it's what really matters. And then track 3, and we're going to be doing our challenge webinar next Wednesday for track 3. Track 3 is holding your best accounts. And what that means is that in a recessionary environment, start selling something exactly what people want, then your challenge is going to be, how do I get sales? And so if that's the case, selling to your existing accounts makes the most sense. All right. So now you need to be at the website, ibgr.network, mouse over resources, click show notes. And then when you get to show notes, if you haven't done it so far, go on the right-hand side below archives, categories. And as you get down toward the end of the page, you'll see season 12 operations. Click it. And you should be looking at 3 shows that we've done in the past. Now, the job here in the challenge is simply to say to you, hey, here we are. And what questions do you have about what we're doing? All right. So we started this thing off a few weeks ago with 20% of all startups fail within the first year. 5 years, it's only 50% remain, and only 30% last a decade. Okay. And so if you just do those numbers, if you take 100 companies, 80 of them are left after 1 year. Okay. So 80 is 40. So 40 are left after 5 years. And if only 30% make it to year 10, only 12 are left. And 2 of the 5 reasons for the failure is related to cost under control. Now, if you go ahead and click that one, and that would be S12, season 12, episodes 5 through 9, and go ahead and click that, I will do a quick review on that. And of course, I'm monitoring this through StreamYard. So if you've got anything that comes to your mind, put it in the comment section. Okay, on LinkedIn, on my personal page, William Eastman, and Facebook. If you're radio and you want to get me on Facebook, then that would be look for ibgr.network. Okay. All right. So here we go. Lowest cost producer. I've said it before. I've said it, I say it all the time, is that becoming the LCP is nothing more than looking at your processes, starting with the ones, okay, the processes where variable cost is tied. And then once you've got that in line, then you're going to be taking a look at the processes that support that. And so one group of people affect margin. The other group of people affect profit. In other words, your in-house people, the people who don't relate to the customer directly, but are providing support to the people who are doing the work, they affect your profits, because their costs you can't pass on to the customer. Those are the costs of doing business, fixed costs. All right. And so this is simply a concept of value mapping your processes. And we've talked a lot about this. So the deal is you make a visual map of a process. You can't do them all once. You take one at a time, take the most important one, the one that, say, generates the most revenue. Because if you haven't done some things, I can't tell you which is your most profitable, because you can't answer that question. All right. And the reason is that most accounting software doesn't give that answer. It tells you where your greatest revenue is, but your profits or your revenue and your costs are aggregated. They're put together. It's hard to strip it out. We'll talk about that later on the track 1 on finance on Mondays. So all you're doing here is building a map of what you're doing right now. And here's my guarantee to you. If you've never done this before, there is a 10 to 15% improvement or reduction in cost waiting for you. I mean, this is low-hanging fruit story. Low-hanging fruit. Pick up the gold on the ground. You don't have to mine yet. That is exactly true. So what you're doing is you map a process out, and you simply say, okay, of the things that are in this process, and I look at the steps, and let's say the process has 15 steps or components to it, I go through my value checklist. And the value is value to the customer. That's really what we're talking about here. So you ask yourself 3 questions. Question number 1, does it provide value to the customer in a way the customer would be willing to pay for it? Yes or no? And then number 2 is if you get a no, if you get a yes, you keep it. All right. You keep it. Now you got to figure out how to do it more efficiently. Different conversation. If you get a no on this, on the other hand, and no, the customer wouldn't pay for it, then the second question is, are we doing this for love the cough button? Are you doing this for engineering quality? In other words, is this a step that has to be in there to secure or guarantee the quality of what you're doing? All right. So that's the second one. If you get a no here, if you get a yes, it stays. If you get a no, then we're on to the third one. And that is this some sort of requirement? You know, you got an environmental requirement, you got a safety requirement. In other words, external bodies are enforcing rules upon you that if you don't do them, you're in serious trouble. And if you get a no here, get rid of the step. You've just identified the customer won't pay for it. You don't need it from a engineering or a production standpoint, and you're not being required by some outside body. Why the hell you're doing it? And I guarantee you that this is at least half of the 10 to 15% improvement that you're going to find. Now, this is a whole process that we spell out here, and we did that in episode 6 or podcast number 6. And by the way, on the website, those links take you right to the podcast. So if you want to listen to more in-depth comments on it, I will take you there. And then in episode 7, what we did is we talked about how to do this as a process, and we broke it down. And it's something that was done probably 30 years ago in lean manufacturing. That's where I first came across it, is that when you map the process for the first time, it's called the as is, as it is. Then what you should do, if you can, is you should go out and do some research on what are the best of the best do. And one of the things we talk a lot about on this program is that if you're not a member of Dun and Bradstreet Hoovers, then maybe you ought to consider it, or some other like Statista, some other resource to take a look at the numbers, because they have it. They can tell you basically in your industry, this is what it should cost you to make something. This is what you should be paying in labor, etc. And you get those as standards and said, well, if we go to that, what should be the process? Now, if this is the first time you've done it, you probably can't get there this time. Okay, so then what you do is you say, okay, how much can we achieve with the time and resources that we have on our at our disposal? And that is the 2B, and that is what you're going to build. And again, my guarantee is that if you go that process, in the process of getting people involved, unless it's you by yourself, but even then, there's 10 to 15% cost improvement. And time is part of that cost improvement, because if you take time out, then what happens? It takes you fewer times. Okay, so that's basically what we've got in season 12, S12 episodes 5 through 9 on becoming the lowest cost producer and what the model is. Okay, so we're approaching break now, and so for all of you that are watching this on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can hang around. For those of you who are listening on the IBGR network, I got to go out for a hard break. So I appreciate you listening. When you come back, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this to the next level, the next step. And what we're going to be talking about there, so it pops up, we're going to be talking about supplier value, because what we're looking at is the entire delivery chain. So I appreciate you listening. Don't go anywhere, and we will be right back on Facebook, link, and Twitter. Yeah, we're on Twitter too. That's basically how it goes. And so what we do here, let me stop, recharge, and start at this is how a regular radio studio operates. The only difference here at IBGR is that I'm the only I'm the only person who does not have a studio engineer. Everybody else here has a studio engineer. I do all my own work, so I've got to be able to. Yeah. Jeremy Gray. Yes, sir. One of the best fractional CFOs I know. And that gives you a sense for who's on the air here with us. I mean, nobody on the air is lightweight. Everybody here who runs a successful business, and everybody on the air is a subject matter expert. And that we pride ourselves on. Because if you look at IBGR, what coaching is a way of delivering that to everybody. Now use the plumbing. When you turn on the spigot, the plumbing in your house, and you turn on the spigot, and you have water comes out. Well, in our case, what we have is, think about it. All you've got to do is get our listener guide, and if you got a listener guide, then you basically know everything. Okay, so here, it's not the internet seems to not. Is alternative financing. Right? Connecting. Yeah, the internet. All right, so we're back. So what you need to do is, if you're just joining us, then you need to get to agr.network is our URL, our broadcast frequency, our name, and then when you get to the website, resources all the way to the right, you'll see. You'll mouse over that. Show notes will pop up, and when show notes pop up, you're going to get shows that are in the queue. This is not in the queue because they're prior shows that I've done. So you need to scroll down. You go past archives, you go past categories, and as you go down, you can see all the people that have contributed to be on the air here. When you come down to season 12, operations, click that. And what pop are I'll tell you now what I want to handle in this next segment before we go to our next break. Season 12, S12, episodes 17 through 20. Okay. And this is increasing supplier value added. Now, as a engineer, let's say, because I got to claim who I am, is that one of the things that I do know is that you got to look at your whole process, the entire, if I can hold my hands up, the entire throughput of the system. So we're going to start at the beginning, because no matter what you do, suppliers are providing the things that go into your sausage maker on how you make stuff. Now, here are a couple bullet points before we get into it. Reducing supplier cost from 9 to 4% could double your profitability. Now, just think about that. 9 to 4%. If you took 5% out, you cut it in half. You take your supplier cost and you cut it in half, you could double your profits. All right, or at least double your margins. All right. Number two, 57% of customers believe that the right suppliers are a competitive advantage. And if you've been in business for a period of time, you absolutely know that's true. And then the last one here is high value suppliers provide expertise beyond what you have. In other words, if you're looking at big companies, they got marketing department, research department. You are a customer of theirs, and they're pretty good. And they're going to need to help you sell. I mean, what is it? It's in their best interest. So here, starting with episode 17, we kind of do this. So 18 suppliers. Okay. So when I'm looking at a supplier, I'm looking at the people who provide me the things that I have. And though I'm focusing on delivery of services or on production, depending upon if you're a production company or a services company, but this also applies to everything in the business. So it could be even buying office supplies. Number one is how easy or how much friction have they put into the buying process? In other words, how easy do they make it for you to purchase what you want when you need it, when you need it? And some organizations are excellent at this, some are not, and it's not necessarily a function of the size. It has to do more with the orientation of the supplier. Typically, the big ones who've been around a while have done everything they can to make it as easy as possible for you to buy and not move on to somebody else. Number two is if they're sending you stuff, okay, how much rework or how much do you have to put back? In other words, rework would be you get raw materials in and it's not quite right and you've got to work it in order to use it. Or it could be that they ship the wrong stuff. In other words, okay, now what we got to do is we got to send it back to get it. And I'm assuming that if you purchased it, it had some criticality to it. It was something that you needed. And so, how much of that goes on with each one of those suppliers, regardless of the product or services they provide you? All right. Now, third thing is I want to take a look at what the impact of that friction and rework or ship backs and get get chargebacks and then get the shipment a week later or so. How does that affect either your unit price or your price per hour? Unit price means you're in some sort of manufacturing, you're making something. So it's how does it increase the price of that particular unit? On the other hand, if you're selling services, then it's adding the cost to the hour that you charge for or the minute, depending upon how you do that. And so, how much impact does that have? And that'll give you a pretty good sense because what it'll turn out is that if somebody can take the friction out of the system, easy to do business with, you don't have to do any rework. And if that saves you, say, 10% in either your unit price or price per hour, why aren't you jumping on this bad boy? In other words, you go in a different supplier might cost a little bit more, but all this is gone. And so, at the end of the day, that higher price might not be a higher price, actually be a better margin. And then the last one, and this one really pertains to larger suppliers because the smaller ones, small businesses like yourself, probably don't have these resources. But what expertise do they have to share? In other words, do they have a marketing department? They got a marketing department, and you're having questions about social media or how to market, and you're trying to get more people to your website or more people to come into your bricks and mortar operation. They may have some pretty good answers for you because, after all, and think about it yourself, you would be doing if you're in B2B sales and you're looking at the product or service that you sell, you're concerned about whether your customer is making any money on what they buy from you. Because if you're not, then they're going to move on. Whether it's your fault or their fault is immaterial. And so I really care about how well that's going. But this expertise usually means that they have larger departments. And do they have it to share? And are they willing to share it? Which is something we're going to get to here in a second. Now, if you scroll down on the show notes and go down to episode 19, which is the third segment here, then what you're going to be looking at is, okay, I've got a good handle on where the ones I have right now. Well, let's take a look at some other things that are happening. So, for example, is there good faith negotiation going on between you and them? In other words, are they being straight up with you? And I know I used this example before, but I'll use it again because it gets me with cell carriers. Is that you're with a cell carrier for years, a new one comes into town, they offer the same coverage, the same features, everything, same uptime, but they're cheaper. So you go to the one, your current carrier, and you say, hey, I'm moving on to so-and-so because they got a better deal. And they come back with, well, wait, you don't have to go anywhere. We'll give you that deal. Well, that's not good faith. And you come forward with the deal. You're not rewarding any loyalty from me. You're trying to prevent me from leaving. And so as I deal with people, are our negotiations based upon honesty? That's what I mean by good faith. Number two is, are we having reasonably in-depth meetings? All right. In other words, is it, slam bam? Oh, never mind. I can't do that one on the radio. Well, I shouldn't do it on the radio. But do we really get down to the hard tax, and are they willing to sit down and really understand our business as well as we are really willing to understand their business? Because there are no one-way relationships long term in business. Streets after that call one way, but usually not long term relationships. A third one to look at is, are they replaceable? Now, obviously, if they're not replaceable, they kind of have you over the hump. But I would not accept that as a first answer. I'd only accept that later on as I drill down. And then the last one, which gets up to do they have expertise to share? The last bullet says willingness to invest in the relationship. In other words, are they also willing to share that expertise with you? Right now, I can't give you a numeric figure or a spreadsheet to kind of work it out, say who's the best. I have no doubt that if you have these conversations with them, the winners are going to pop up. Now, the last one I'm going to be doing here is on episode again. If you're LinkedIn or on Facebook, Twitter, put a comment. It's going to pop. It's going to pop up. All right. So the last things I want to consider is this: how to build the right relationship. Let's say that we have decided we're going to work together. So what I want to do is I want to be able to answer to myself before I ask the question. How does an association with our company, our brand, because that's really what it's about. It's not the company they're doing business with, really, in the way they look at it. It's the brand they're doing business with. What does your brand stand for? Does your brand enhance their brand that you are a customer of theirs? Turn it around. Does having them as a supplier enhance your brand? In other words, let's say you're a tech company and you are one of your suppliers is Microsoft. Now, in some markets, that may be really helpful and that enhances your brand. In other markets, if you're a basic Linux person, then do you have a relationship, say, with Red Hat? And so you got to look at this, that the relationship needs to enhance both brands. Number two is, how do we build revenue for each other? In other words, if they're constantly doing research on how to market, how to sell, how to deliver the services better, how to build a product better, then that information ought to be with you. But also, you have something they don't have, and that is you have direct contact with the customers. Direct contact with the customers. And so what that means to them is you learn things that they probably can't get because they're kind of removed from the process. All right. And that's what I mean by shared investments in each other. In other words, I'm willing to help them grow their company. They're doing research, they're testing a new product out. Can we help out there? And then finally, the last one, which is kind of more into the just in time. And I'm less hot on this because after the supply chain problem, maybe just in time, which means you only buy stuff when you absolutely need it and you keep no inventory on hand. Maybe we need to go back and think more just in case because the supply chains are unreliable and probably will remain so for a period of time. But the fewer suppliers I have, for the most part, better. Okay, fewer organizations to match up with. And a quick story here is I got a good friend of mine who runs a snow removal company up in Canada. It's a landscape company during the season, but usually winter you don't do that. And he lost a contract with a major automotive manufacturer, not because he didn't do good. They didn't do a great job removing snow. They couldn't invoice correctly because what they did is they did not match up with their supplier, what the supplier needed. It's crazy, but it's true. All right. So for those of you who are listening on IBGR, it's time to, because we got a hard break coming. So you're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm here. I got 2 more segments to do. I greatly appreciate you listening. Don't go anywhere, and I will be right back. All right. So for everybody else that's holding on to any questions, this would be a great time to pop one over. All right. All right. So we're going to check what's going on over at the station because I have to turn off the monitors. Otherwise, I get a lot of double talk, double speak. Any comments yet? So if you want to pop a couple in, be a good time for get me to answer. Girls. All right. I guess it's not going to tell me what's going on. Yeah, there's that guy. All right. So there we are. All right. So now what we're going to be doing with the it goes back to it, and the internet's slow. I'm going to have to get a bigger line. I'm going to have to get a T1. And this is a great lesson because I'll take this out of the 10 to 15% gain you can see or find because this is separate. But there's a huge amount of money uh, to be saved. I put it that way. A great deal of money to be saved here if you begin to look at your assets and say, okay, how are they performing? Because we buy a lot of and you got to say, well, what am I getting from that? I mean, I partner with a company that it has consolidated a number of platforms in and a great opportunity for us. The problem is I can't monetize it. And maybe 6 months from now, but for the amount of money I have to invest in it, it's not going to produce anything for us. And so that's what I'm talking about here. Here, you just go, I can't go there. All right. So doing what's going on at the station? If you don't think that's a significant number, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. There are like 96 people just like you. Because owner in Vietnam or in Taiwan or in Australia or in country. What are they looking for? Answers for how they start, grow, reinvent or renew their business, and finally exit. That's what we do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My name is William Eastman of Partner Co founders. Do for those of you who are new and are joining us right now, you need to go to the show notes, and that gives you the detail as well as links to the podcast. IBGR, International Business Growth Radio, is our call sign. .network is our name. That is also our URL, ibgr.network, the website. And it's our broadcast frequency, by the way. When you get there, you'll see the navigation bar resources all the way over to the right. Mouse over. You see show notes, click it. And unfortunately, you got one more step. Because categories, when you come down to season 12 operations, click it. And that's where we are now. What we did is we talked about what is the lowest cost producer. And then the second one we did was on looking at finding or improving the value of the suppliers that we have. Those are all ways that I can achieve lowest cost producer. And today, our third segment here, and this is be show 12, or season 12, excuse me, and this is episode 41 to 45. That's our podcast numbers. And this is becoming the lowest cost producer dash performance of company's assets. Okay. So now the issue here is that, and this is an interesting take on this. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at your company as a bank. All right. How much money is in the bank that you haven't accessed yet? When we've been talking about that already. So I want to take a look at now some of the investments that you made. You got a portfolio of investments. What is the ROI on those? Okay. Or in this particular case, ROA, return on assets. Because if I buy something, I buy a piece of equipment, or I subscribe to a platform, tell me what the return on that asset is, because I don't have money to give away, and I'm not here to finance anybody else's company unless I'm getting the same value. Okay. And a lot of this you can get from the balance sheet. But let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Now, in manufacturing, this is a manufacturing number. Uh, when I was doing turnaround of small manufacturing companies, one of the things we would look at is utilization of equipment. So let's say you've got 4 machines on the floor, and I would be looking at over the space of a year, uh, what percentage of time is that piece of machinery utilized? And the rule of thumb that I learned, and it's not an exact number because this could vary by 5, maybe even 10%, but 80% is a good number for me. And if I see a piece of machinery that's operating at 60% of the time, why do we own it? Why is it here? Because that 40% of the time it's not running, I still got to pay for the thing, or I've already paid for it. And just like inventory that you don't use, that's cash collecting dust. So what we would do is we'd look at that equipment and say, gee, could we do without it? Could we outsource that? And if we outsource that, what impact would that have on the business? Now, a lot of times you'd go, no, I can't trust these other people to do it. We got to keep it in house. Okay, well, let's take another one. Could we sell it to a leasing company and then take it back as a lease? And in fact, the previous episode I used as an example of a company up in Canada who is in landscaping during the summer and in the winter in removal. And we did that with their snow removal equipment because what we looked at is that for at least 5 months a year, they're up in the Toronto area, but still it didn't snow that much. And so a good 5 months of the year, the stuff's not used. And they had bought it and they were paying on it. And we were able to change the financial situation pretty quickly by selling that equipment to a leasing company who then leased it back to us. Now, over the term of the lease, we wound up spending more money, but right then they were cash strapped. And what they picked up was a pile of cash. This was a better return on asset. So what I'm looking at here is I want you to look at your assets in your company to say, well, when I do that, what am I getting? So here are some areas to look at. For example, cash. How do I use cash? Now, I hear you going, well, how do I do that on cash? Well, let me give you a rule of thumb again. I learned this from a guy, was working for a small engine repair shop in Cocoa, Florida. And this guy was an emigre, escapee of Castro's utopia. And this guy's English was pretty good, but it was enough Spanish in there. And he would always say to me, nothing matters except what's in the cigar box. Okay. Meaning he kept his cash in a cigar box. All right. And obviously, being Cuban, he loved cigars. And what he taught me, he said, Bill, there's only 2 things to spend cash on. One is something that produces cash. Okay. In other words, I'm buying something that is going to create cash, like spending money in sales and then getting those sales dollars back. And then the other part of that would be, is it an appreciating asset? Well, that's the only other you do. In other words, buy it, and a year later, it's worth more money than when I started. So the use of cash. So how do you use cash? Okay, let's look at accounts receivable. How well is that operating? Because my view of the world is anything that's over 30 days is a loan, and I'm not a bank. So if I have customers that are not paying me quick enough, then maybe I need to factor my accounts receivable. I look at my contracts, and I go through my contracts. Are they favorable to us or not? Now, I may not be able to renegotiate this contract now, but I can redline or highlight in that contract what needs to be fixed so that I can get contracts that have more favorable terms. The equipment, I already talked about. The same with tools. We bought a tool. How much utilization are we getting out of that tool? We buy furniture. Are we getting anything out of the furniture? The real estate, the inventory, prepaid insurance, etc. In other words, I'm going to look at every piece of the company and say, what are we getting out of our expenditures? Like, would I buy new furniture? Unless I had a lobby with customers coming in, I wouldn't buy any new furniture. All right. I would basically there furniture for the customer, I'd go to some place like Aaron Rents. Everybody has something like that around them. I'll rent the damn furniture that's in the lobby. The furniture that everybody's on is secondhand. Not good stuff, but am I going to spend a lot of money on furniture? Hell no, I'm not. And the same with real estate. Now, the real estate side could be that you buy the property your business is on. Now, long term, that's a good decision. But short term, what's going on here? Because more than likely, all that's happening is you're not doing anything to turn that into a cash generating asset. It is appreciating in value, but it's not generating any cash. So, hey, should we be holding that real estate? We wait until the end. Inventory I pretty much hammered on is inventory that's not being used within 30 days, kind of like accounts receivable, where you're being a bank. On inventory, that's cash collecting dust. And then on prepaid insurance. In other words, we're paying upfront on our insurance policies. Let's take a look at what are we getting out of that insurance. And so those are all things that I would look at. Now, there's probably more to the list. Those are the ones I came up with. But every asset I have in the company, I'm going to look at it and say, how is it contributing? Now, during an expansion, during a growing economy, these are less critical questions to ask. And what happens when we've gone through a good economy is we get sloppy and we buy things and we don't really care about cost. That's why at the beginning of a recession, the smartest move for a business owner is to go here to say, okay, I'm going to get my house in order before things get tough. And we talked about this, I think last week when we were doing the issue on suppliers. The best time to renegotiate a contract with suppliers is at the very end of the expansion, at the very end of the ocean wave, right? As you get to the crest before the things get bad. And that's the best time to negotiate a contract with them because times are good and you can get probably a better deal. So those are all things that I would look at. But the big thing here is spent money on assets. What am I getting out of the assets? That's really all I care about. All right. So now that, where do I get that information? Well, I get it from the balance sheet. There's one place I can get that. I can get that from, and these are reports that any accounting software can give you. Balance sheet, debt to asset ratio, that's a good one, and return on assets. Okay. Those are three that I would be looking at. And I would, again, scrutinize this closely because this is as the economy gets worse and you're going to be challenged to bring in more revenue, then your focus has got to be, at least partial focus has got to be on how do I, and you can look at it one or two ways. You can look at it, is the glass half full or half empty? If you said the glass is half empty, you're going to go after cost. If you say the glass is half full, then you're going to be going after margins. That's the word I was looking for. But if you had a 10% reduction in revenue, but you utilized your assets better, you might be able to make up for the loss of money. Why? Because it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. Now, when we come back from the break, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the last part of it and some of the things that we don't consider, like trademarks, copyrights, patents, domain names, employees, brand, goodwill, things of that nature that are all part of value either immediately or long. But let's do a little music. So you're listening to IBR, Business Growth Radio Network. And by the way, if you didn't know this, let me tell you, by web ranking, we are the #1 internet-based business talk and news network. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. All right, everybody. So there we are. And we are off the air. So now we're only on the air with you. And so we've got a couple more minutes here. We got one more 15-minute segment. We're going to go into it. But yeah, the thing is, when you're looking at processes, and this is just my background from doing it for so many years, is when you look at processes, look at input, throughput, and output. And so what we talked about the first two sessions was just what is the process, the map, what's the inputs, what's the throughputs, what's the output. Today, what we've been focusing in on with the suppliers is inputs, and now we're looking at throughputs in terms of how well those assets are performing. Okay. Now, the issue of outputs, that we're going to handle in track 3 when we talk about customers. Uh, uh, because really the customer is the active gauge of all that. In other words, when the customer gets it, then the customer is making 3 judgments at the same time about what you're doing. Oh, I forgot to hit that. That's all right. What time is it? 40. Okay. Right back. See what. Manage the time clock. I got to manage the sound.
Yes.
I'm going to keep that on because I forgot to get the timer started. All right. So, not one thing, it's another. All right. So get us after the fact. The best place to post is either in social media, or or you can go to our our show notes page and then just find that page with those show notes and go ahead and post your comments there. First thing I do in the morning is I look at those posts, and that's where I start. All right. So are we back? Let me see here. All right. I'm going to assume we're back. Start- I'm talking to the people who are watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. It was doing. Well, we've we recognize that as a business, even though we're all media channels, YouTube Rumble next week, but we're doing a good spread of social media to get on there. So, IBGR network. IBGR is a call sign radio station on the internet called International Business Growth Radio. IBGR is our name, our URL, and our broadcast frequency. Now, what you need to do is if you haven't done it, you need to go to the website, IBGR. There, you have our resources all the way to the right. Mouse over that, and you'll see show notes. Click it, and when you get to show notes, unfortunately, there is one more step. When you get there, what you need to do then is scroll down, and on the right-hand side, past archives, past categories, you'll see season 12 operations. That's where we are. And the show that we're working off of is, and what we're going to conclude, is S12, season 12, episodes 41 through 45. And this is Becoming the Lost Coast Producer, which is track 2. And the show specifically is Performance of Company Assets. And where we are is that we are at the bottom of the page, and we are going to be doing, right now, we're going to be doing episode 43 and episode 43 and 44, that we're going to do them together. So when we look at the value of our assets, the other thing we're trying to do is figure out where else we're making money. So trademarks. If you haven't trademarked your business, you need to go there because what it's worth. Now, it is not worth anything right now, but it's part of the bigger picture of you constantly looking at return on assets. And as we talked about in the previous segment, return on assets is basically a number that you can look at by using any one of the software programs for bookkeeping, and it's nothing more than income divided by the amount of money coming in divided by the total money that you spent on assets. Okay, and that gives you an ROA. And what you want to do is that you want to if you increase the asset, the denominator, then you want to increase the numerator, the income, by a lot more. I can tell you from my corporate days, when we were looking at projects or we're looking at spending money, the hurdle rate that they put on me when I was coming in with a proposal was about 5 times. In other words, if you're spending 100, if you ask for $100,000 of budget, your expectation is $1,000. Next question is going to be uh, one, how long to get to that? And the second question is how long to break even? If we spend $100,000, how quickly are we going to get the $100,000 back? So that's what we're looking at here. So trademarks are important because they increase the asset value of your company, even though they don't do it today. Trademarks and service marks are basically the same thing. That's typically used for logos and names and things of that nature. Now, copyrights has to do with intellectual property, and that's also critical. Here at the radio station, this is one of our most valuable assets, is our intellectual property. Now, the intellectual property of our hosts that are on the air is all theirs. It's not ours. But the shows that I do, this is our intellectual property, and there's a considerable amount of it. After coming on to 44 years in the consulting business, we've collected and done a lot of research, and we have a pretty intense base. Now, patents are just basically you got a process. You don't want to copy by a competitor. You put a patent on it. That has a value. Now, how would you know trademarks, copyrights, and patents what value they have? Well, even though I don't talk about it in this series, I have talked about it on our Friday show, on our Founder Series show, which is designed for business owners and helping them to think more like executives. Is that if you were to get a business broker, and I highly recommend build a relationship with a business broker, all right? And what I'm with them is get to know them very well, and all before you saying about the future of your company, get your business evaluated. Now, when they evaluate your business, what they're doing is they're not looking at it from the point of the seller, looking at it from the standpoint of the buyer, and they're taking a look at what if they put your company on the market today, what is it worth? And that is really insightful because the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a big smackdown because you're going to be thinking about all the days that you went without sleep and all the games that you missed and how much your own money you dumped in and blah blah blah. All that's important, but the buyer doesn't give a damn about that. What what assets do you have that have any value? That is what they concern themselves with. And so what happens when they come in, all this will be evaluated and that they will all this will be valued, and then they'll give you, if you sold your business today, here's the number. Now about 99% of us are going to be unhappy with the number. So now the second thing you ask your broker is, well, how do I increase the value of my business? And they will give you insights about where to spend money. In other words, what investments are going to produce better returns in your business. And trademark, copyrights, and patents, as they are appropriate, are worth a great deal. And you get a number on that, and that number looks good. And even if you don't have a lot of cash flow, having that type of valuation, and you need to get, say, a line of credit from the bank, which you haven't done yet. And if you haven't done it yet, you better go do it right now while you still can get it. Or if you want that line of credit increased, this will impress the bankers. All right. So some other things here, domain names. All right. Your domain names are worth something, especially if you got them kind of early and you got things that could be used by multiple people. In other words, evergreen domain names like abc.com, okay, or coaching.com or consulting.com. I mean, those things are worth tens of thousands of dollars. That's a good evaluation for your company. Your employees, okay, your employees actually, and by the way, I'm doing all intangible assets right now. Your employees are also one, especially if you've got a good workforce and you don't have a lot of turnover and you don't have a lot of safety issues. All that's going to come into play. Now, it's going to show up indirectly in your tangible assets when I'm taking a look at how well the company is performing. But your employees are worth something. Now, on the brand side, this is also something that's absolutely critical because when you sell the company, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to value the tangible assets. Then they're going to look at the intangible assets. And so brand and goodwill are also too, because if somebody wants to buy your company, the brand perception that you have and the goodwill that's generated in the marketplace is worth something. And those valuations will really help you, not like the tangible ones in the immediate. The tangible ones are the ones that you're looking at right now if you're trying to become the lowest cost producer. These intangibles are ones where you're looking to the future business. Now, trademark, copyrights, and patents and domain names are critical because those are part of today. Okay, because if you're not protecting your secret sauce, then somebody else is stealing it. All right. So now let me kind of end this up here with your ROA times the industry average, and this is where you want to go with this. Okay, and so your intangible asset value, and this is where you get your brand. You take your ROA and you multiply that by the average of the industry. You subtract, and this is all in a formula that's in front of you. It's real simple. It's no calculus. It's all multiplication and subtraction. And then you take your pre-tax earnings, and that tells you what your intangible asset brand value is. And that is really critical to have. All right. So hopefully what we've done here is we've given you a good flavor of, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, whether you're watching this live or you're watching the recording, of what we do around here. We are dedicated to the small business owner. In fact, we call it entrepreneurial capitalism. Capitalism is under a number of assaults around the world, and we're trying to hold the tide. Now, we're not into the corporate stuff, because corporate capitalism a lot of times turns into crony capitalism, or an economic term for it is called fascism. I don't use that word too often because it conjures up a guy with a funny mustache and a crooked cross on his armband. Uh, but the reality is that fascism is a specific type of economic system where large corporations and government are in bed together. Businesses are highly regulated. They get in bed with government because then they can buy favors. And the challenges in those environments, it is devastating to the small business owner. If you don't think that's true, just take a look at mainland China. And mainland China's principal problem is it has lots of large corporations, and it has a lot of mom and pop, I'll just say, noodle shops. But it does not have very many small to mid-sized enterprises. And that's why China is at the mercy of what the global economy is. Whatever is happening in the global economy is where China is at, because it makes most of its revenue, most of its gross domestic product that comes to China comes from export. And China had thought by this point in time that they have a balanced economy, and they haven't, because they don't get that their economic system prevents it. A better way of looking at China would be look at France and Great Britain in the 18th and 19th centuries. We called it mercantilism. Okay, that one will work as well for you if you like. Not exact definition, but close enough. So those are the things that we are up against. And so our dedication here in IBGR is that small business owner who doesn't have a lot of money, who can't go out and spend $20,000 to go get marketing experts, but they have the money to have an internet connection and a computer, and they can download our show notes, or they can download our listener guide and determine who to listen to now. And that's what we do. All right. I greatly appreciate you listening or watching, however you're here. This is the IBGR Network, the #1 business news and talk station on the internet. My name is William Eastman. I'm the co-founder and managing partner. Greatly appreciate you being here. Don't go anywhere. We've got great programming coming up. Take care. All right, there we are. For the rest of you out there, that should take a cast. I'm not going to stay on the air much longer. And you got about 5 minutes, and then I have to move on because I've got other things to do today, just like you do. All right, so appreciate you listening. The best way, let me give you some things to do. The best way that you can contact us is go to the website, ibgr.network, and you can go to contact us and drop a note there, or you can send it to me directly, and that is programming, PROGRAMMING, programming at ibgr.network. And that's .network. It's not .net. It's .network. And send me an email. And here's my guarantee: I'll answer before I go to bed. or if it comes into me overnight, I'll answer it when I get up in the morning. So with that, thank you very much for watching and listening, and I will see you next Wednesday, same time. Take care.